the need for PLM within your company. We'll talk about a lot of different types of metrics and benefits that can be received. And hopefully you'll take some notes of some things that will actually be important to you and your organization. So let's start. We look at business today. Everyone, I don't care what business that you're in, you have to do things quicker, do things cheaper, and have higher quality. That's a given. I don't know of any kind of company market or other markets you want to be in that have different needs or different regulations. Those become important as well. Pricing pressure. There's no market, again, that we see where pricing isn't important, where pricing isn't being driven down in some aspects. And if you drive it down so fast, so hard, you don't make any money, you go out of business. So how do you survive? The beverage industry has to do with regulatory complexities, formulation, formula optimization, complexity of the product, complexity of the product itself in this markets around you. So if you look at these things, cost, quality, time to market, if you have improvements, but that's not good enough. You really have to look at being innovative. Innovative in how you work, innovative in your products, innovative in your processes. You truly have to be different. You have to act differently. You can't expect to have significant changes in your business, competitive changes in your business, if you continue to work the same way you have in the past. Because things around you are changing rapidly. So you have to be dealt with. And we say that it's no longer good enough just to look at cost, quality, and time to market. You also have to look. I think if you think about this for a minute, and say if you had an environment, physical assets, your people, finances, and facilities, and then there's the deliverable assets. And it's about creating and transforming those intellectual assets into deliverable assets. That's what PLM is. Most basic form. It's about that it's about the creation and transformation process. It leverages and really manages those intellectual assets for the betterment of your company. So how do you enable innovation? A lot of companies really struggle with this. They think there's how should I say this? A unique formula. They say actually there's some fairly fundamental things you have to do. First, you have to be able to capture this information. If it's scattered around, people, let's say, what often happens in most companies, most of their intellectual assets exist here, in individual workers, in their and capture that information so that it becomes part of the assets of the company. You also have to enable collaborative working, allow for people to exchange ideas in a fairly free manner, so that people can understand what's going on. They can leverage ideas across organizations, across departments. Also need to be able to provide easy ways that people look at that information, find that information, make sure that people best practice. That you always want your information to be clear, concise, and valuable. So clear is that if I look at it and you look at it, we both understand it the same way. Concise means it's everything I need, nothing more, nothing less. And valid, I can use it to make decisions on it. So again, if for it to be an intellectual asset, it has to be clear, concise, and valid. Good morning. Meow. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this event, a very special event, the Food and Beverage Industry for the Innovation Forum 2014. Today is a very focused workshop on product lifecycle management, and there's hopefully be a lot of discussion. This is a very important topic, I think, for all companies here, on how do you manage your product lifecycle. It means many things to many different people. So hopefully this morning in the addresses that I will provide, we'll gain a common understanding of what PLM is. And this afternoon, some case studies and other great examples of what PLM can be in the food and beverage industry. SimData, which I am the president of SimData, is a global company that focuses on product lifecycle management. And we've been working within this food and beverage industry now for PLM for about 14, 15 years. And we would say this is one of the most interesting markets, both the food and beverage industry, but also China. We see this as a wonderful opportunity for companies to really gain a competitive advantage and truly be innovative, both innovative in their products, but also innovative in how they deliver their products to the market. There's many different issues that we'll discuss about why PLM, what is PLM, why should you do PLM, that hopefully you'll gain a better understanding for your own company of what PLM can mean to you. I would also hope that you'll be able to network with one another and maybe share ideas with people that are here that are experts in PLM. There's a number of people here that are from some of the leading vendors in the technologies, and also some of you that have already implemented some facets of PLM. We would hope that there would be a high level of interaction today, and of course the coming days if you'll be at this event as it continues the next 2 days. So again, welcome. I'm very happy to be here. I arrived last night from the US. I'll be here a few days and then I have to go to Europe. So it's part of traveling is moving around the world and looking at how companies are really trying to achieve a PLM process or PLM technologies enablement, which allows them to be competitive. Not just competitive today, but competitive well into the future. In many ways, PLM has become a competitive necessity. People have to look at PLM. Companies have to do PLM. And PLM, again, can be many things to many people, but it has to look at and support your products and your life cycle. So it's very important, hopefully, that you'll receive a better understanding of what that means to you today, and some basic understanding about PLM and how it really is focusing on product, and it's from product from concept to end of life. So that'll be our starting point, and I hope that we'll have many interactions throughout the day. There are, I know, microphones up front to be able to ask questions also. We will have a tea break at 10:30, and then for about a half an hour, I believe, and then we will continue until lunch to about 12:15. So again, welcome, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad you were able to join us this morning. Thank you. So let us begin. As I said before, this is a kind of the morning workshop, is an educational workshop. So it'll be in some ways generic. To some of you, maybe you already understand PLM better, but hopefully it'll fill in some maybe missing pieces that you have of what PLM can be. As I know, there's translation going on. Also, you'll have both in Chinese and in English here as well, and then translation for those that need it. And hopefully I will go slow enough so that translators can keep up and make sure that they can capture everything that we're trying to communicate today. So my name is Peter Bilello. I am a president of SimData. As I mentioned, SimData is a global PLM research, or what we call a global strategic management consulting and research firm. PLM is the core of our business, and we've been developing an understanding of PLM for more than 30 years. The company actually was founded in 1983, and the SimData comes from computer integrated manufacturing, and we continue to talk about the same issues that we decided to talk about and continue to talk about since 1983. In this work, we research and track more than 700 products that are enablement to PLM in various forms. We generate reports globally, including a very detailed China PLM report, which will be released very shortly on the market numbers for last year. So a little bit more about who we are. SimData's core business is strategic consulting. We do not sell product. We do not sell software. We help companies understand what is PLM, what it means to them or should be for them. How would they go about evaluating and deciding how to implement PLM? To look at technologies, look at process changes, look at organizational changes, and really understand how do they get the most out of PLM enablement, that's what I'd say. PLM is about process and data management. It's about enabling processes, enabling the data that's related to your product. So those are the focus areas that SimData has. And we've actually done work on 6 continents. So we're very much a global organization that helps companies around the world understand what PLM is and help them figure out how they should go about executing a PLM program. This shows you the countries that we've worked in. So far, I believe it's some 40, 50 countries around the world that our consultants have actually participated in activities. We were first to the China market more than 10 years ago, I think around 1999, if I remember correctly. My office, well, it's on an airplane usually, but my physical office is really in Ann Arbor, Michigan, near Detroit, so I'm sure you've heard of Detroit. Ann Arbor is a small town now of about 100,000 people, but it's a very nice university town with a very large university, the University of Michigan. So there's a lot of young people, a lot of innovation that goes on in that city, and it makes it very interesting to live there. We've actually been global for many years. We entered the global market back more than 20 years ago as an organization. So what I will bring to you today is an understanding from a global perspective of what PLM is, with a special focus on food and beverage. So I mentioned before about strategic management consulting, and that is our primary business, but it's supported by our research. As I mentioned, over 700 products, software products, and service vendors we support through our research and our understanding of the global market. We also support activities and events, such as this event, through our educational services as well. We also have a certificate program, which actually I'll go participate in 2 days of our certificate program in Suzhou the next 2 days to support general awareness of what PLM is. So the research and education support our consulting services, which as I mentioned before is our primary business. And as we like to say, we are strategic advisors to our industrial clients and the vendors of technologies throughout the global market. We mentioned that these things are part of our marketing and our packaging. PLM transformation is what we do with our industrial clients. We help our industrial clients transform themselves from how they do PLM today to how they will do it in the future. And that's key to our business. So as I mentioned before, in our global work as consultants, we work with many different types of companies. Some companies may have very similar attributes or characteristics that you have. Some may be quite different. We actually, as we look at the PLM market, we look at how is PLM supporting various types of companies, providing capabilities, technologies, processes, and how they can be leveraged across other companies or other markets as well. Historically, PLM has kind of been founded for the most part in the discrete market. Still, the discrete industries are probably the bigger users of these technologies because of the complexity of product. But I would say today, because of regulations and packaging and formulation, that food and beverage is becoming just as complex as many of the discrete markets where PLM had it more of its foundations or its roots. So these are some of the companies that we've worked with over the years that are in the discrete markets. Certainly the food and beverage and the different parts of formulated products, many of them in the CPG industry, the consumer packaged goods industry. This is a newer space for PLM. As I said before, we started this work as a company about 1999, and you see some of the companies that we've worked with in various aspects of process formulation. Some very leading food and beverage companies, of course, and I'm sure you recognize as well. Pharmaceutical actually has some very similar characteristics. Petrochemical has similar characteristics also to food and beverage. And there's some interesting industries outside of the normal space that we've done work with as well. So hopefully I'll be able to bring you examples that come from these real life work within PLM. So as SimData, we like to say is we like to be practical. We like to provide guidance based on real things that have happened, things that are worked, and also help our clients understand what they should avoid. So there's a few other things I'll mention just quickly. I would encourage you to go to simdata.com if you're interested in more information. But basically our research, which we call PLM Foresight, publishes a lot of information about the market. Again, you can go to simdata.com and receive access to quite a bit of that information. There's white papers, there's analysis reports, there's commentaries, and others that exist there. There's also some reports for purchase. As I mentioned earlier, there is a report coming out shortly on the PLM market in China, which will address all the different markets within China for PLM, both discrete and non-discrete industries, that you might find interesting at the appropriate time. And the last thing that we have is the PLM leadership, which is the educational services. This shows some of the events that we're speaking at around the world. It allows us, again, to gain an understanding, help the market understand what PLM is. And we spend quite a bit of time of educating the market or making the market aware. There's also a number of events that we put on, which we call the PLM Market and Industry Forums. These are events that actually tell the market what's happening. So in our research, one of the main things that we do is track the global market, and we actually publish them reports and do a series of workshops or one-day events. And actually, I was in Shanghai about a month ago with the event in China that actually displayed the numbers for 2013. And then the last thing is we have a series of community events around knowledge councils. These are research groups that we have. And then finally, the PLM Certificate Program, which is an educational program where a lot of the material that we go through this morning actually comes from. So again, hopefully that you will learn from this and gain a better understanding of what PLM is for your own organization. So what is our objectives for today? So we'd like to give you a good overview of the PLM market and understanding some of the key aspects of it. Where did it come from? What does it really mean? What is its definition? What are some of the characteristics or the functionality, the system's functionality that you could expect, especially with a focus on the food and beverage industry and the process industry in general? Understanding what is PLM? If you think about PLM, what is it that you can hopefully then use in your own company to define it for yourselves? We'll also look at how would you go about defining a PLM project and a program for your own company? How would you go about evaluating technologies and understanding what capabilities do you need to have to enable your PLM vision? So we'll spend some time on these topics and a few others as we go through this morning that hopefully, again, you'll gain a greater understanding about PLM. So why don't we begin? We'll begin with a simple definition that I will build and hopefully for you to gain an understanding of it. And then we'll talk about, specifically before the tea break, about PLM in the food and beverage industry and the key functionality that you should expect to have or look to have within your organization. We'll talk about how do you build a business case? How do you justify the need for PLM within your company? We'll talk about a lot of different types of metrics and benefits that can be received. And hopefully you'll take some notes of some things that will actually be important to you and your organization. We'll then take a look at evaluating how to best evaluate PLM technologies, PLM capabilities, and what are the best practices and how you would go forward and implement those technologies. And there's really looking with a focus on process and data enablement. And then finally, I'll give you some closing remarks before we have lunch. So let's start. If we look at business today, everyone, I don't care what business that you're in, you have to do things quicker, do things cheaper, and have higher quality. That's a given. I don't know of any kind of company in any industry where that's not important. But that's usually not good enough anymore. In a rapidly growing market where traceability becomes very important, where regulatory requirements become increasingly important, cost, quality, and time to market generally is not enough. You have to change the way you work. Ultimately, you have to look at the different aspects, things that are actually impacting your business. As you think about a global perspective, or maybe even a local perspective, as more companies enter the markets that you're in, or that you want to grow into other markets, competition is becoming more important, more fierce, more complex. So you have to deal with that. You also have to deal with the globalization in general. More companies coming into China, or you trying to get out of China. How do you deal with globalization? Maybe with companies that have been at this business longer than you have, for example. And how do you deal with the changing, let's say, competitive landscape? from a global perspective? How do you develop products not just for your market, but other markets you want to be in that have different needs or different regulations? Those become important as well. Pricing pressure. There's no market, again, that we see where pricing isn't important, where pricing isn't being driven down in some aspects. And if you drive it down so fast, so hard, you don't make any money, you go out of business. So how do you survive when pricing is also being pushed, unless you change the way you work or become more efficient? And then finally, driving that pricing is the complexity issue, the product complexity, which a lot of things within the food and beverage industry has to do with regulatory complexities, formulation, formula optimization, complexity of the product, complexity of the product itself from a packaging perspective, but also complexity from a regulatory perspective. Regulations is one of the most rapidly changing things in this industry segment itself. How you deal with this complexity as it continues to change, especially in a global perspective. If you desire to go global, if you're not already, how do you deal with the rapidly changing regulatory issues that don't only exist within your current market, but in the other global markets around you? So if you look at these things, cost, quality, time to market, if you continue just to try to squeeze these things, maybe you get another couple of % of improvements, but that's not good enough. You really have to look at being innovative. Innovative in how you work, innovative in your products, innovative in your processes. You truly have to be different. You have to act differently. You can't expect to have significant changes in your business, competitive changes in your business, if you continue to work the same way you have in the past. Because things around you are changing rapidly. So you have to be willing to change or able to change to meet the challenges that are in front of you. To deal with the complexity around product, the increasing regulations that are in front of you, the complexity around packaging, and the changes around that. And globalization, competitive position, and pricing. All those things have to be dealt with. And we say that it's no longer good enough just to look at cost, quality, and time to market. You also have to look, and very important, look at how do you innovate and how you work. How do you drive innovation in all forms, not just product form, but also process form as well. So there's a basic premise, a basic understanding I'd like you to gain, that your ability, your organization's ability to enable innovation provides you a competitive advantage. So I think if you think about this for a minute and say if you had an environment where your organization would be enabled to innovate, you would have a successful company. Right? Innovative companies are successful companies. And innovation, again, in many forms. I don't think anyone would disagree with that comment. The other premise is that an organization's intellectual assets, your knowledge as a company, that's what drives innovation. That's what makes you unique, is your people, the knowledge that your people have, and how you drive innovation, how you change the way you work, how you evolve processes and products, how you approach the market. These are what really drive innovation for companies. And if you can't do that, generally you become stagnant. You basically usually fail or get taken over by someone else. So there's many different forms of innovation. I'm sure most of you understand product innovation is very common. Is get a new product out to the market which is innovative in some manner, maybe a feature or a function or a taste or a package, something that's different. But process innovation is just as important. How do you work? How do you manufacture? How do you deliver to the market? These are just as important innovations for companies. And it's key to PLM. It's not just about product, it's also about process. There's a few other forms of innovation that are important as well that you should think about. One is marketing innovation. This is where you create new markets by the way you approach the market, maybe with a new way of actually delivering a product, or gaining the market understanding how your product can be used for something else. And there's many examples in the market today about products that were made for one thing but are delivered to the market for something else, and very innovative as a result of that. There's also what I call creating something from nothing. This is where you stumble on a new idea, and you're able to bring it to the market because you recognize its ability to do something. These don't happen very often. It's usually very rare occurrence. Most innovations happen around product, but more and more have to happen around process. And if you can do that, then the other two innovations can happen as well, because you have a better understanding of what's going on in your business, and you're more likely to take advantage of other innovations that happen that maybe in the past you would have not realized existed. So where does innovation take place? Well, there's a very basic formula for PLM, and all companies do PLM in some form. Maybe not in a holistic manner or an integrated manner, but if people bring a product to the market, they're doing PLM in some form. Usually very disconnected, perhaps, or very complex, overly complex. But generally, what any business starts with is the creation of intellectual assets. These collective ideas of the employees, basically. It's the knowledge of your company. That's the starting point. A product does not exist without the information that describes it. Right? A physical product is a result of information, executing something on a set of information. So what you do is you define the product, and you transform that product into the deliverable asset. That is what you bring to the market. It could be marketing, messaging, it could be the packaging, the formula. Those are all things that are part of a physical execution upon that information that was the intellectual assets. So that's the basic formula. And most people think, well, innovation itself should take place during this transformation. Well, that's somewhat true. But if you don't innovate, if you don't leverage the foundation of your intellectual assets, you'll never really be innovative, or as innovative as you could be. You have to start with that foundation of knowledge, that information set which makes you unique as a business. And you have to be innovative in not only how you create that information, but also then how you transform that information into your products. So it's a life cycle. It's from concept. Concept is the definition, all the way to delivery of the product to the market. So you're dealing with these intellectual assets which become a core. And without that information managed appropriately, then you probably have scattered sets of information which really aren't very strategic to your business. And intellectual assets are the core of your business. And it becomes very important to understand that from a PLM perspective in order to be competitive well into the future. So at the core, this is really what your business is about. It's about that knowledge. It's about that information set, as I call here, this intellectual assets, the collective ideas of your employees. That's really at the core of your business. All businesses have that. Because without that information set, and without the people then interacting with it, without the facilities and other things, using that information to then transform that into what you deliver to the market. So there's three types of assets in your typical company, right? There's the intellectual assets, it's the knowledge, it's the set of information that describes your product and processes. Your physical assets, your people, finances, and facilities. And then there's the deliverable assets. And it's about creating and transforming those intellectual assets into deliverable assets. That's what PLM is. In the most basic form, it's about that it's about the creation and transformation process that leverages and really manages those intellectual assets for the betterment of your company. So how do you enable innovation? A lot of companies really struggle with this. They think there's how should I say this? A unique formula. They say actually there's some fairly fundamental things you have to do. First, you have to be able to capture this information. Right? If it's scattered around, and people, let's say, what often happens in most companies is most of their intellectual assets exist here, in individual workers, in their minds. And at the end of the day, all that intellectual assets go home. It's not an asset to the company. And what you need it to be, you need it to be an asset to the company. Those intellectual assets are as an asset to the organization. So you have to first be able to capture that, create and capture that information set so that it becomes part of the assets that the company can manage. You also have to enable collaborative working. Allow for people to exchange ideas in a fairly free manner so that people can understand what's going on. They can leverage ideas across organizations, across departments. Also need to be able to provide easy ways to look at that information, find that information, and make sure that people are operating on the right information. That it's, I always like to say, this is something from a CM2, which is configuration management best practice, that you always want your information to be clear, concise, and valid. So clear is that if I look at it and you look at it, we both understand it the same way. Concise means it's everything I need, nothing more, nothing less. And valid, I can use it to make decisions on. So again, for it to be an intellectual asset, it has to be clear, concise, and valid. We also have to remove barriers that exist, barriers of communication. That's important for that collaborative effort to take place throughout our organization. We have to break, let's say, silos of interaction, or let's say islands of automation. Everyone has their own set of information, but none of it really is an intellectual asset to the business. And then finally, we have to enable more people to interact within and throughout the company and throughout the extended enterprise. Because what makes you a better company is all your partners as well. To be part of that interaction that exists or should exist to make better products and make better processes. And these are all core to what PLM is all about. So taking advantage of your intellectual assets is critical. And if you don't do these few things, then you're probably never going to really be able to do PLM as well as you need it to be. So let me define a little bit more what I mean by an intellectual asset. So it's comprised of all the components of the enterprise's product and process definition. So it's not just the bill of material. It's not just the formula. It's much more than that. So it's all the specifications, the formulas, the requirements, the documentation, and other components that define the product. It's everything that you need to be able to move that product from an idea, from a concept, to delivery to the market itself. So it's not only that information set, but as it says here, all the business and manufacturing process definitions that are within the scope of the life cycle. So what you own, the processes that you own as an organization. So it's that full set of information that describes the product and processes from concept through end of life. That will get that product to the market and support that product when it's in the market. So it's a very rich set of information, much more than documents, much more than bills and materials. And I will expand on this so hopefully you'll get a better appreciation of the complexity that we're dealing with. So as I mentioned before, there's three types of assets that a typical company has. Right? There's what we call the intellectual assets. This is the focus of PLM, the product, as it says here, the product definition. So the definition of the product and the processes. Then we have the product production. This is the deliverable assets. If you notice here on the bottom, we have from concept to end, how you manufacture that product, how you support it in the market. It's that whole set of information that describes it. So I would say the most successful companies are those that take an end-to-end view. They understand from concept to end of life. They understand the information and they manage that information and the processes, again, from concept to end of life. So I'll put here some examples of the areas of benefit that a typical company that takes on examples after our tea break of some specific metrics that can be used to measure these things. So the first one, which is fairly common, is getting a product to market faster. So time to market, reducing time to market. It also can be done with fewer resources as well. Usually what happens is if a product gets to the market first, usually you can gain a better market share if you have the right level of quality and you're really willing to adjust prices as others come to the market. So greater market share, more efficient delivery to the market itself, obviously faster to market. But if you can keep that market share, generally that means add-on products are more likely to be purchased as well. So these are all important components, but if you were supporting the product, maybe even just a help desk that supports the product and calls that come in for the product, being able to be more efficient in that as well, supporting the product long term becomes just as important as introducing that product to the market quickly. So these are some of the, as I said, the basic areas to really gain a more efficient organization, a more profitable organization, and ultimately then a more successful organization. And the ones that are the most successful, and I will show you some case studies, I know there'll be some that will be discussed this afternoon as well. The ones that we find that are most successful are those that take that end-to-end approach. That understand, one, that intellectual assets, what they are for their business, and they learn how to create and capture that for the life cycle. Those are very important components of what PLM is. So what are some of the kind of the functional areas of PLM? And again, these vary by implementation, but these are some of the kind of the core aspects of PLM. Historically, PLM really focused, especially in food and beverage, around the formula. That was kind of the core at one point, that specification management and formulation. But what we're seeing is an expansion, both further downstream, but also further upstream in the life cycle. So today, it's very common for people to talk about, within the context of PLM, talk about portfolio management. What products do they bring to market? What products do they keep in the market? How do they make sure that they have the right product mix in the markets that they want to sell in? So they have a better understanding of their investment to the market itself. And that then drives requirements management, for example. What are the requirements? Some of those may be regulations. Regulations are requirements themselves. But there's also market requirements beyond the regulations that have to be managed. Because you cannot sell in a market if you don't perform correctly to that market, both from a regulatory standpoint, but also a market standpoint, what the market wants to see, what they're willing to buy. Of course, in the development period of developing out the data, developing out the specifications, developing out the formulas, optimizing that, delivering that into manufacturing or digital manufacturing, defining the manufacturing routings, the recipes and others that have to take place, the mixing instructions, and others that are very manufacturing oriented, into strategic sourcing and working with the ingredient suppliers, for example, being highly collaborative with those ingredient suppliers so that you have full traceability. We talk a lot about in the food and beverage industry from farm to fork. We want traceability from the farm all the way to the person using the fork or chopstick in this case. But we want that full traceability, so we have to have that all the way back into the various levels of suppliers that exist within the supply chain. And of course, retailers want more of that information as well. So it's not only getting information from the suppliers, but also sharing that information up to the retailers as well, and ultimately even to the consumers through websites or through call-ins and other things. So PLM, if you look at the top here, really expands the strategy of your programs and your products, delivering programs or new projects and new products to the market, having cost management from end to end. It's really optimization of your life cycle from concept to end of life. One of the things that I find interesting within the food and beverage industry, especially the beverage industry for some reason, is a lot of companies will deliver products to the market, but they never want to take it out of the market. If someone's buying it, they want to keep it in the market. But it costs you money to keep it in the market. So portfolio management, not just of what you should bring to the market, but also what you should keep in the market is important as well. Because you want to optimize your investment. You have limited time, limited resources, limited money, so you have to optimize what you do as a business and do that from a PLM perspective, an end-to-end lifecycle perspective. So now we get to PLM, Data's definition of PLM. So we talk about it as a strategic business approach. It's not just technologies. It's a consistent set of business solutions. It's the way you work. It's enablement. It's, as it says here, the collaborative creation, use, management, dissemination of product-related intellectual assets. So again, creation, use, management, and dissemination of the intellectual assets. The virtual product definition and the virtual process definitions that exist throughout the product development lifecycle, but also into market as well. It's not just your organization, but the extended enterprise. And it's from concept to end of life. And it can also manage and support the definition of your plants as well. So it's a full definition of a business approach that allows you to have a high level of connectivity from concept to end of life. That's what most companies don't do. You may deliver a product to the market, but your information may be disconnected. You may have processes which are disconnected. You may have organizations which are disconnected. You don't really have an end-to-end approach, but you have more of a department-to-department approach. That's usually the most common way that people do PLM today. And as a result, they don't get the benefits of an end-to-end approach that can be taken if you really have a PLM approach that you implement within your organization. On the upper right side, I will explain this a little bit more after, actually in probably about 15-20 minutes. But we have what we call a PLM model. And that model describes capabilities or functionality that you typically see within a PLM environment or PLM solution. So I'll spend a little bit more time on this in a little bit. So I've said this a couple of times, a holistic end-to-end approach. It's very critical for PLM to really be successful, or fully successful. Many people ask me, say, do you see a lot of successful PLM programs, projects of implementation? And I'd say, well, most projects today in PLM are successful in that they implement software. But I would say most still are not as successful as they could be. They're not achieving all the benefits possible because they're not willing to really take a holistic approach. They may only focus within, let's say, the formula development or R&D or commercialization aspects of it, but not really the full life cycle from concept in marketing and market understanding requirements all the way through into production and beyond. So there's benefits that can exist, but without a holistic view that really includes all your services and facilities and products, includes your customers, which also, by the way, regulatory agencies are your customer. They're just as much your customer as the consumer is, and the retailers are. If you don't have consumers that don't want to buy your product, the retailers aren't going to buy your product either. Retailers aren't going to buy your product if they can't sell it because the regulatory people don't approve it. So you need to have those three aspects are always critical. You have to have people that want the product, people that will sell the product, and people that will approve the product to be sold. So that the partners, the suppliers become critical parts of that life cycle that have to be managed and integrated as well from a PLM perspective. So this holistic approach is quite critical. This doesn't mean that you do everything at once. This is what scares a lot of people. They think, well, if I do this PLM, I have to do this big bang. I have to do everything all at once. That's not true. What you have to have, in our opinion, is a vision, an end-to-end vision. And then you have to look at where are the benefits, where are the issues that I have, the challenges, and how do I overcome them over time? And how do I evolve my PLM environment? Because PLM will change. Why I say that is because the markets change, consumers change, regulatory issues evolve and change. So that means your PLM environment will change as well. So generally speaking, PLM is a journey that never ends. It's a journey of enablement of processes and product with a focus on innovation. In many ways, we're starting to talk about PLM as a platform, a business platform, by which you innovate. And what you look to do is implement that platform over time to enable your business to be innovative. So what about the life cycle? So typical life cycle, right? I start with requirements, market requirements, regulatory requirements. I define my portfolio, what products do I bring to what markets when. I do my planning, I do my research and development, I commercialize, work with purchasing, bring in new products or ingredients and other things. I develop quality aspects of it, work with suppliers all the way through operations, and ultimately I retire products in the market. So it's my portfolio I'm managing, my portfolio of products from concept to end of life. And where you start, again, depends on your business and where, let's say, the pain points are. Generally speaking, people will start with things, especially in food and beverage, like specifications, managing specifications. By the way, I would say that one of the biggest issues that a lot of companies in the food and beverage industry has is they think of specification as a simple document. And for companies that think of it as a simple document, you'll never really do PLM completely. Specification really is a data record, or at least it should be. It should be what I like to call intelligent specification, where these are information sets themselves that can be related to other information sets, which allow for a lot more higher level of innovation to take place and do much more rapidly as a result of it. The interesting thing about documents themselves is that they're actually a construct. They're an artificial construct that was created by IT people a number of years ago, mainly because of PCs. And we lock a lot of information in these artificial constructs. But PLM technologies today allow us to break apart that information and really manage it as information sets which again allow for much more granular level of security, interaction, configuration, and other things, which provide a lot more value to the business themselves. So I look at the life cycle. I showed some pictures earlier that the life cycle was linear. It's really not that linear when you think about it, because there's really a circle. It's really a life cycle, because information can live on, let's say specifications, ingredient specifications can live on in multiple products. There could be even packaging that lives on in multiple forms. So the life cycle is really very circular. And I may have products that exist that are in development, others that are in procurement, others that are in production, others that are being marketed. And I have this set of information that's really at the core. So we have this intellectual assets and the physical assets are at the core of your business, right? Your people, finances, and facilities, and your product and process information. That's core to your business. That's really what you operate on. Without those assets, you will never deliver anything to the market. So if you remember earlier, I said you create those intellectual assets, you transform them into your deliverable assets. And they're transformed through the execution of your physical assets. Your physical assets, your people, finances, and facilities, use that information to create those deliverable assets. So where does PLM fit within this? So one of the things that a lot of people talk about is the PLM and how does that fit, especially with ERP. So a lot of people struggle with the kind of interaction between those technologies. So PLM, first of all, you can see it's at the core here. It's right at the center, the product and process definition. So it's managing that information for the whole life cycle. It continues to manage that information no matter what's being done with it at any given time. It also managing that creation and capturing those intellectual assets. Utilizing and understanding what's coming from the market, working with partners, developing out that set of information so that it can be then executed upon. So the execution then is really part of the ERP. So an enterprise resource planning technology generally will take that definition and execute upon it. They generally do not define it, they execute upon the definition. And they generally, a lot of the ERPs will manage your other resources, your finances and your people. So there is a direct relationship between the two, but there doesn't have to really be an overlap. Some people think there is. Sometimes there's some components that are overlapping, but it's really a collaborative working relationship between those two environments. There's also customer relationship management, which is another major IT domain that exists in many organizations, and then supply chain management. Generally speaking, supply chain management and customer relationship management are very transactionally oriented. Those that deal with collaboration, those that deal with specification development, others are really up in the PLM area. That's where you work with partners and suppliers that provide that intellectual asset to be part of that core information for your business. One of the things that's kind of interesting in the market itself is we're seeing a kind of a split between those technologies that support the virtual product or those intellectual assets and those that are more the transaction-based that deal with the physical product. Kind of a split between those two. So really, we're starting to see that there really are two major business platforms that people are developing and are implementing within their businesses. One around the product lifecycle support and one around the resource or enterprise resource planning. Those are becoming the two major components or major business platforms. And there is some overlap because there's information that has to be shared between the two. And I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But today, that's what we're seeing most companies really drive towards, is these two major enterprise platforms. One is around execution and management of the resources. The other one is around the development and management of the intellectual assets. So I'm going to draw this a little bit differently and look at this overlap in a little bit more detail. So in the top we have the virtual product, in the bottom we have the physical product. And we have from concept of the planning all the way through the end of life or through service. So I have these intellectual assets, it's the PLM domain as I mentioned, and then we have the physical assets, the deliverable assets, which are the domain of the ERP. Again, when I talk about ERP here, I should mention that I'm not talking about a specific ERP product, just like when I'm talking about PLM, I'm not talking about a specific PLM product. I'm talking about PLM as a strategic business approach And I'm talking about ERP as enterprise resource planning. There are some ERP vendors that also do PLM. Some do CRM, some do SEO as well. There's actually some PLM vendors, or people who think are PLM, that actually do some of those other capabilities as well. So think about these as process areas, not as a specific piece of technology. So there is an overlap. There's no doubt about it. There's an overlap. A lot of these overlap has to do with core information sets. So you have, let's say, specifications or ingredients, or maybe there's parts of your packaging, parts, for example, bills of materials, supplier relationships. Those things are important to both. The supplier interaction, the supplier development of definitions of, let's say, ingredient specifications, or parts or packaging components. That's important for development, but it's also important for purchasing. Purchasing tends to be a transaction done by ERP, where the collaboration and development is done within the PLM scope. So that gives you some understanding. There is overlap, not usually in the execution of processes, but in the management of information that has to exist. Now ERP, there's more aspects to ERP than the ones I put up here, but this gives you, there's definitely quite a number of capabilities, functionality, which exists within the PLM space, which does not exist within the PLM space. Excuse me, exists within the ERP space, does not exist in the PLM space. Now there's a third component here that we're seeing more and more companies, especially in the food and beverage industry, really drive towards. And this is the execution, or the MES, Manufacturing Execution Systems. And again, there's some overlap there, because the ERP will tell it what to do or when to do it, but the PLM is saying what to do or how to do it. So the definition of the routings or the recipes, mixing instructions, those definitions are needed within the MES world to actually go produce something. But when to do it, the schedule, for example, production schedule, that's going to be driven from the ERP environment. So there's interactions there as well. But today, what we say is most major companies really have these three major enterprise solution sets. They'll have desktop, Microsoft Office or other technologies, but on the desktop. But at the enterprise level, more and more companies are driving towards these three major areas. If they have production, if they don't have production, then they may only do PLM for that. They may not even need ERP, or they need light PLM. Light ERP, maybe just for resource management, for example, human resource management. Sometimes I have to buy full people, but how do I manage that and make sure that I'm doing it in the most cost-effective manner possible? Able to determine where the source of product, where the supply chain, what are the right partners to use, when to use them, when not to use them. Is their quality at the right level? Are they tracing their product back to the source that I need? Can I make sure that I'm compliant if they're compliant? Able to acquire or rapidly incorporate new organizations. This is an issue. A lot of companies right now, there's quite a bit of cash available to acquire, to expand both products, but also expand into new regions and new markets. So how do I actually capture their intellectual asset and make it part of the greater organization's intellectual assets? Best-in-class companies know how to do that. And they can very, very quickly leverage that intellectual assets that they acquired, not just about acquiring people or processing plants, but also acquiring that information set is just as important. And best-in-class companies understand how to do it. And last one, you're able to identify and manage core competencies. Understand what type of business are you really in. How do you differentiate yourselves from the business? Is it the way you market your products? Is it your product offering? Is it how you deliver the product to the market? Various core competencies that you might have. Understand what they are, and that's what you really want to focus on from a PLM perspective. A few other ones around best-in-class food and beverage companies. Proactively manage product project risks throughout the life cycle. So having an end-to-end approach to how you develop your products, deliver them to the market, and then ultimately retire them in the market. You'll be able to manage risk as you do that. Proactively control changes against product definition information. So maybe I want to make a tweak to a product. I want to change an additive. Or maybe I have to remove an additive. Or maybe I have to change the, let's say, the nutritions that I actually display on the fact pattern. Or maybe claims management. I have to change the claims I'm making because I can't say low fat anymore in a certain market because of some other changes around regulations. So I have to track all those changes and make sure that wherever those issues arise, I can deal with them and I do that effectively and efficiently. Be able to treat regulatory compliance as an integral part of product development. So a lot of companies look at regulations as something I do near the end. I go, let's say I design a product, and then I see if it's compliant. And say if you do that, then you're not going to be as efficient as you could if you make that as part of the product, as part of the process. If you do that as requirements to start with, so that as you're developing the product, the odds of you developing a product that won't be compliant, hopefully zero actually, certainly as close to zero as possible. So regulatory compliance becomes part of the development process, not a check at the end or towards the end of the process. So also reviewing the agencies as customers becomes a critical change for lots of companies, where they see them as a necessary evil instead of as a necessity. You want them to be a necessity. You don't have a choice, so accept them as a necessity and manage them like that. And then diversity, especially driven by intelligence specifications. Allowing your specifications to be a set of information that really describes your product. That becomes really critical to be able to manage the product life cycle in the most efficient manner. So here's some of the key requirements. The first thing, kind of the core of any good PLM solution for the food and beverage industry is intelligence specifications. This is where those specifications are data. They're not documents, they're not files, they're actually data records. Artwork and packaging, connectivity specifications, and managing those informations when they're being developed, and the applications that they're being developed in. Regulatory requirements or requirements management in general, being able to have a robust set of requirements traceability. So one of the things that you have to understand is that a product is a result of its requirements. Right? So if I change I never change a product if I don't change a requirement, unless the product did not adhere to those requirements. So requirements become core data elements, and in many ways, the specifications are core requirements to the product. Highly dynamic product development processes, so being able to manage those processes and interaction between development groups and regulatory requirements of production and other areas of the organization that have to collaborate highly in order to get a product to the market. Distributed supply chain and managing distributed supply chain becomes very important as well. A very tight link between product and project portfolio management to make sure that you have the right products in the market, the right markets. And then integration with other sources and the non-traditional, as it says here, non-traditional authoring tools that exist as well. Many different types of authoring tools exist within the food and beverage industry. Some highly specialized that you may have developed yourselves that you may want to integrate into a core set of capabilities that are part of that PLM environment. So specification management, I keep coming back to this because it's so core to a PLM environment within food and beverage. And it's really the backbone of the product and packaging innovation and product development. It's also key to manufacturing quality information as well. Because these are the things that are defining what you're going to do, and then you have to then go measure against to make sure that you did what you were supposed to do. As it says here, a holistic specification management approach includes the tools and the best practices for streamlining the development, testing, and use of product material packaging, artwork, assembly, and process specifications throughout the extended enterprise. So they're not just for your organization, but they're for all the organizations that interact with you as well. So specifications are part of the product structure itself. They define the core of the product and the structure of the product. In the vehicle to communicate product information both within your organization and throughout the extended enterprise. And they're also templates for manufacturing and then other inspection and quality as well. So they're very, very critical. Without a good specification management capabilities within your PLM environment, you're probably going to be just doing document management, which is really not good enough. So what's a specification? Here's some of the typical types of specifications: the product form, packaging and artwork, equipment, testing, marketing, process definition, So these are some of the most common specification types that you would see within the food and beverage industry. In general, we define 3 types of specifications at the highest level. One is a standard, which is a type of specification. Then there's the specifications that we've been kind of talking about already, and then a requirement. And some companies call these all types of specifications. We prefer to actually have these 3 types a little bit different to clarify the difference between a standard, a specification, which is really more the ingredient and the formula and the recipe, and then requirements, which are more market requirements or regulatory requirements. So what's typically required then in the food and beverage industry? Well, an extended enterprise lifecycle approach is something that, as I said before, very holistic, and it has to take consideration, integration of a number of elements. First, the specification, creation, and management. Again, it's a core, fundamental attribute of a PLM environment for the food and beverage industry. Project portfolio management. So I have to know what am I developing and why, so I can maximize my use of my resources. The workflow and collaborative mechanisms to make sure that the right information is communicated to the right people. Right people review and approve those things. And the last one is standardized process flows for the execution of the development process itself. So those 4 major elements typically are part of any true PLM approach taken by a food and beverage company. And then this list gives you a set of what we call PLM support domains. And a lot of these are what we would call applications within the PLM, my PLM definition I showed before. So the first thing is ideation. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll go to the next slide because they will define this in a little more detail. We'll start at the front of the process and go throughout the life cycle. So ideation or innovation management. So lots of companies there's lots of ideas that you have as a company. Your employees have an idea for new packaging, new artwork perhaps, or way to market it, maybe a new product, a new formula. So how do I capture those ideas? And how do I ideate? How do I develop them into something that I bring to the market? That's managing the innovation lifecycle itself, which is part of the upfront of PLM. Requirements management. And what are the requirements for this product? Managing, again, the marketing requirements, the regulatory requirements, and other requirements that exist to make sure that the product I bring to the market satisfies those requirements. And then what do I bring to the market? What are the portfolio of products that I want to bring to the market and keep in the market? So portfolio management is not just what I bring to the market, but what I actually manage in the market itself. Specification management. I mentioned this quite a number of times. We talked about a number of different types of specifications, but some of the most common one would be the ingredient specification that describes the ingredients that you will bring together in a formula. And there's a formulate, and the formula itself is a specification or types of specifications. There can be specifications for the packaging, for the artwork, and other things. So there's various forms of specifications that I mentioned. The formulation and recipe management. So formulation is where things become a little bit more interesting for lots of companies. And this can be a big differentiator, in the PLM solution, is how do they really do formulation and formula optimization. If I change this ingredient slightly, what does that do to the amount of water vapor that will be given off? Or if I change this way of making a recipe, what does that change into the product itself? And what will be the byproducts? And so I have to be able to manage those information sets and then be able to reformulate very rapidly to understand what the impacts are. Package and design management, another critical component. Because generally you have to put that formula into something. And you have to make sure that packaging doesn't interact. And you understand how it outgasses. You have to understand shelf life and other things that exist. You have to make sure that there's enough space on it to put the nutritional fact panel and other information sets that have to be on the packaging itself. And of course, it's just the packaging itself and how that packaging will be made. Quality management. So I mentioned before, specifications are used to define what a product will be. They also use to verify that the product was done like it was supposed to be done, created like it was supposed to be done. produced as it was supposed to be produced. So quality management is an integral part into the whole product development and the whole product life cycle. Supplier management. Again, if you're not going to make everything, you're not going to develop everything yourselves. You're buying products, ingredients, and other things from third parties. So having an interaction and being able to interact with the same set of information or appropriate set of information becomes critical as well. New product development and introduction and process management. So the stage gate approach that most people take to make sure that I've taken care of everything that I'm supposed to throughout that life cycle so that I can introduce the product and that I'm compliant and that I'll be successful once I get to the market. Manufacturing process management, or process development, defining the recipes, defining the mixing instructions, defining what equipment does this product go over, can it go over. If I have to, again, adhere to different regulations, I may have to run that product on specific equipment. I can't run other equipment, for example. So it's that interaction between the product and the equipment side of that, of the business. And then data synchronization. Synchronizing information, especially to retailers and regulatory agencies, becomes very important. And I think more and more the retailers are requiring this ahead of time because they want to populate their own systems with information so that when their customers come to them about something, about your product, they can actually provide some of that answer themselves. And of course, it's for pricing and other things as well. And the last thing is the regulatory compliance management. Now, there's other major areas. There's other areas. These are the major areas that we see. And regulatory compliance is a process in itself. And I said that the companies that are better about PLM are those that have regulatory compliance as part of their process, not something that's done at the end, but something that's done throughout. So I'll leave you with a couple of other examples before we take our break. But first one, this is from a client of ours, a very major global food and beverage company. And they looked at specification management as being the core of their PLM environment. And you can see here specifications, they call it global specification management solution, provided specifications of multiple types of organizations, internally and externally. But also was a feeder into their global reporting and analysis system. Because it became core to their quality management system as well. Because they had to validate that they received the right ingredients, validate that they produced the right formulas, validate that they produced the right recipes, validate that the packaging was correct and to spec. So it became their core data repository, but also drove most of their processes. This is an example from a P&G, actually, more than just food and beverage, but a lot of process in the consumer packaged goods area. P&G has a very, very holistic PLM approach. You can see there's 4 major areas that PLM covers for them. There's the consumer and customer needs management, so requirements management basically. The second one down is product portfolio management, and then collaborative product design, and then finally direct material sourcing. So you have a very rich set of PLM capabilities. This is their vision slide, by the way, that they've been developing out. And it's for different aspects of their business. So let me just show you a few of these. So one of the things they want to have is they want to win at the store. They want to have the right artwork on their products all the time. They want that artwork to capture people's attention. They want the design of the bottles to capture people's attention. So they want to win at the store through the right design, development, and introduction of packaging. In this case, the example is about packaging. They want to win at home. So they want the right formula. They want the right ingredients to be there so the cleaning agent performs as it should, for example. They want the packaging so that people can actually manipulate that bottle, can pour from that bottle without spilling it. So they want to win at the home. They want people to be comfortable with that product. They want the right artwork. They want the right labels on it. They want to make sure that the people understand what they're getting and how they use that product. So winning at the store and winning at home. Another example, Heinz. Talks about some of their focus here around PLM. So decreasing the complexity of product portfolio, increasing the proliferation of new materials, so reuse, and having common specification management system that they can use globally, and then they can leverage those specifications across products. Technology, we use some technology from, in this case, Oracle, that supports that specification management as kind of their core solution set. And just a few others as we wrap up. McDonald's, so I'm sure everyone here knows McDonald's. Starbucks, there's lots of major companies that have used specification management from a PLM vendor to really support the complexity that they have in their products. Because it's, again, document management couldn't do it for them. They were looking for a finer level of detail and information sets to manage and also do that and make sure that they were compliant. McDonald's had to do this because they had to start publishing this information out to the market. They wanted to be able to have one single source of the truth to be able to manage that globally. So for them, that was their core starting point for PLM. McCormick and Company, they sell a lot of ingredients actually, spices and others. For them, again, packaging, specification management, and others became very important to them and kind of core to their PLM strategy. Coca-Cola Company, another one I'm sure everyone has heard of Coca-Cola. Again, developing out a global specification management solution as a starting point in order to have a single source of the truth across, I believe it's 6 or 7 major development centers. That they do have, I think there's 6 or 7 global products. Then they have a couple of, probably over 1,000 other products that exist throughout their regions. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good basic understanding of PLM and then PLM within the food and beverage industry. I'm hoping that you make some notes of some things that are important to you as well. What we're going to go into after we take our break is how do you build a business case? What are some of the details and benefits that can be achieved? Not all of these will apply to everyone here. Some of them may not apply to anyone. But hopefully you'll pick some, maybe 3 or 4 other points out that will be appropriate for you and what you're trying to accomplish as a business. And it has to be, this is really important, it has to be driven from your business. So what are you trying to accomplish as a business, and then how will PLM help you accomplish that? That's where the benefits should come from. So I think with that, we'll take our break. It's I have 10:30, and I believe we have until 11 o'clock, and we'll start up then. Thank you.